Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. We just looked at the first death of Wolverine, which was followed up by Apocalypse, the 12, a story about En Sabanur on another quest to conquer the planet. But forget that noise, we're going to review more Batgirl.
Kidding aside, I did intend to review the 12 or one or two other stories, but I figured it's still Cassandra's 20th anniversary, and focusing more on her time as Batgirl will probably be more than DC will do for her this year.
So, over the next several weeks, we'll be looking at the stories leading up to her 25th issue. Let's pick up where we left off in part 2 of Cassandra Cain Month with Batgirl number 7, and get more of that sweet, sweet reinvention-free goodness.
The cover sees Batman ripping Cassie's suit in half, with "No more Batgirl" seen above.
I bet he's not even mad, he just got bored and wanted Alfred to do one more chore before he went to bed.
Though I did notice the mask looked more broken or cracked, as if it was made of a more rigid material than fabric. Its placement in relation to the rest of the costume is a bit abstract, but that's been true of covers for this title anyway. We begin with Batman beating Cass in a sparring match. Her offense is fine, but since her brain rewiring, her defenses need serious work. He hands her a disc with a lifetime's worth of combative study material, and they'll pick up their match in a week. She goes to the clock tower to make use of Oracle's hologram room. I guess that would make this Batman's greatest hits, huh? Get it? Greatest... never mind.
Probably the worst part of David Kane's violence-only training was that it left Cass unable to appreciate puns. Filthy monster!
Barb tells her to relax, at first calling her Cass, which I guess is a point of contention given being benched, and restates her as Batgirl. Considering it's only been a few weeks since she took half a dozen bullets, it's amazing she's still not bedridden. After going through 127 combat styles with holobats, from Aikido to Yaoyan, Cass figures she's been in there for a day or two, and instead of sleeping or eating, she restarts the program. Because that's good for her. A+ for commitment there, but it doesn't seem to do the trick, as she loses the next sparring match with the real deal, with him even suggesting she's getting worse. Their enemies may not be as expertly trained as he is, but Cass still needs to be ready for anything and anyone, meaning she'll need to study harder. But as she goes over the lessons again, she reflects on what it was like before, with a hopeful expression on her face, how the future would blend into the moment, becoming one, easily described as predicting movements, but it doesn't do it justice. All this knowledge, no substitute for knowing.
Gee, what does that remind me of? Okay, I'll be honest, at this point, anything heavily critical and derisive reminds me of that.
Another sparring match and another bloody nose, but Cass is adamant to continue, even to the point that Batman is looking spooked. She feels her life holds no greater value than the innocence she seeks to protect, but Batman gives her the warning of Jason Todd, the second Robin who lost his life to the Joker, and at this point hadn't been resurrected. Bruce won't let that fate befall another of his pupils.
I was going to make a joke about how I felt his Flashpoint reinvention was a fate worse than death, but I consider Cassie's worse anyway. But what's really odd here is that Batman doesn't exactly elaborate on things like Todd's stubbornness and rash behavior, or other things that led to roughly half the readership wanting him dead. If he's going to use him as a cautionary example, you'd think he would have gone into a bit more detail.
Some prowlers are skulking the rooftops when their plans are interrupted by Cass, who's just wearing dark clothes, some blotchy gray makeup, and spiky hair that would make an anime character jealous. Which really doesn't work because she's half Chinese, but anyway, Batman's out of town for a bit, and she figures she doesn't need defense if she sticks to the shadows and doesn't have a recognizable costume. The next day, she's in a department store with Barbara, suggesting she try a new black lipstick. I don't wear lipstick. Don't date, either. Maybe should.
Cassie, getting sassy.
But that sass must have been in boomerang form, because it comes right back at her when Babs makes it clear she knows her charge has been sneaking out at night. She won't tell Batman, but she wants her to stop if the boss thinks she isn't ready. The way she leapt in front of those bullets leaves one to worry she's out looking for danger, and it probably worries the Dark Knight too. Later, after an offer of a movie fails to draw Cass from staring out the window, she's back on the streets again. But after 2 unarmed robberies and a bar brawl, it hardly felt worth it, until she spots someone off-panel, someone she recalls Barbara telling her about, an assassin that looks for the best fighters in the world to beat to death bare-handed, a woman Cass would do well to avoid. Lady Shiva.
There she was, just a-walking down the street, singing do-a-diddy, gonna find someone to kill.
Cassandra cleans herself up and follows the assassin inside a French restaurant, posing as someone with money on hand just to study the unassuming killer further. She probably didn't come to Gotham for the fine cuisine, and after 3 baskets of complimentary bread without actually ordering, her waiter decides to politely tell her to get out before he calls the cops. That's when a wealthy-looking young woman arrives with 2 large bodyguards, whom Shiva proceeds to attack. Crushed ribs, splinters slicing his organs.
And it's all that snooty waiter's fault. Somehow.
Cass can tell the potential fatality of Shiva's strikes just by watching, so she rushes to confront her, only to end the issue much the same way it started.
Finally, a good reason to punch a teenager in the face. Let's roll!
This brings us to issue 8, the cover showing the 2 exchanging kicks, though it looks like only Shiva's connected, as a bat symbol shines nearby. Her name is Shiva. She cannot be defeated. It will amuse her to destroy Batgirl.
But even she won't be as effective at it as the subtractive retcons of James Tinney IV.
The first page is a more succinct replay leading to that last punch, but with more narration from Cassie. Note how one bodyguard's gun was knocked from his hand when he was kicked, stayed in the air when our girl got decked long enough for Shiva to catch it, and pointed at the princess? Who knows? Anyway, Cass steps in front of the weapon, offering the assassin the one thing she won't refuse. A challenge. She accepts, letting the girl go, and immediately sending Cassie flying into the kitchen. Probably not to check on that quiche she's been waiting for. All our heroine needs is 1 hit, but that's much easier narrated than done. After she gets her arm broken across 2 pages, I don't know if that hurts more or just spreads the pain out, she realizes Shiva is predicting her moves, the very skills she's lost. After a nerve cluster strike leaves her paralyzed from the neck down,
unlike the heads of DC, who are paralyzed from the neck up.
Shiva leaps upward for a killing shot, and strangely Cass's thoughts suddenly go to that man she herself killed. She falls, slowly bleeding as her vision gets darker, and we see a pearl bracelet nearby. She wakes up in an ambulance, curious why the killer didn't, kill her. Even with her ribs, shoulder, and collarbone broken, she can still incapacitate the medic, grab her shirt, thanks the EMT, and makes an exit. Outside the moving vehicle, onto another, onto the street. At least she didn't land on her right shoulder. She notices Shiva's bracelet was with her clothes, as they must have thought it belonged to our young heroine, and she evades the police, feeling that this is a lucky break, luckier than the one that broke more of her ribs when she hit the concrete. She stakes out the restaurant, hoping Shiva will return, but soon realizes how foolish it is to try and fight her one-handed when she got demolished while able-bodied. When she makes the connection that the thought of imminent death made her recall her own murder, that's when her challenger appears. She didn't kill Cass because she didn't consider herself a murderer, and the young woman didn't put up much of a fight. Threatening the rich girl was the only means of forcing a heroic sort of person to act. Wu San had heard the girl was good, but on top of the pitiful defense, she intentionally ignored lethal moves, despite clearly being trained for them. I don't kill.
No ellipses, no breaks between words, which is significant when you look at her previous dialogue in past issues. Sometimes she'll break in between every single word when she's talking to Bruce or Babs, but here, declaring her committal to non-lethal means, She doesn't stutter one bit. That means something.
The lady is a bit disappointed, thinking that in a few years a fight to the death would have been interesting, but now she just wants her bracelet back so she can leave. Cass challenges her to simply take it, but Shiva isn't biting. I think I've broken enough of your bones tonight.
Hey, give some credit to the squad car and the pavement she hit when she was escaping the ambulance.
She wants Cass to hand over the jewelry with her broken arm, which is smart. Most people wouldn't want to hurt themselves more by using an injured appendage. Our girl does as instructed, only to crack Shiva in the face anyway. It hurts, a lot, given the red radar signals shooting out of her shoulder, but it still had enough force to knock Shiva out, cheap shot or no. I did cover this particular scene in my first season, on my first Valentine's Day special, and it's just as fun to read now as it was then. The issue closes on Cass giving Shiva's bracelet back. Sorry, Shiva. I don't kill. But I don't lose either.
Are you gonna call the police? Maybe tie her up and leave her to get arrested? Drag her to the nearest precinct? Oh, just let her nap until she leaves the city on her own? I'm sure Batman will love that.
Issue 9 advertises that she's back in the costume, as her mentor watches her take down 3 crooks at once. She's got a big old smile on her face, and so do I. Unfortunately, after another training session, one where she apparently put on lipstick in between not seeing the attacks coming, she says that her training doesn't seem to be working. Bats assures her that it'll take time to regain what she's lost, train to be as efficient as she was before. She'll be back in the ears in about a year, another decade or so to be more like Batman. She mentally compares that to the 8 years her dad spent making her perfect.
Listen to me, Batgirl. It doesn't matter how long it takes. What matters is that you give it everything you've got, understand?
So that it can be ignored in 2011, desecrated in 2015, and cheaply teased in 2018. Because rating standards will be dragged into the back of the tool shed and shot.
Later, Cass is just staring at a punching bag, perhaps worried it will be able to beat her in a fight too, when she asks Oracle to send a message. Meanwhile, Bats pays another visit to a drunkenly slumbering David Cain. Though, like I mentioned with the first 6 issues, it's possible he was faking some of it, but I doubt he's faking alcoholism every single night just on the off chance Batman shows up again. He seems sound asleep, so Pointy Ears raids his weapons locker for some home movie reels. Man, Zack Snyder's version of Batman would love this room. On a rooftop in the cold night air, Shiva appears before Cassandra, who wants to thank her and gets the "you're welcome" of a kick to the face.
The language of violence is subtle and nuanced, beautiful in a way. Like French, but with more contusions.
Batman watches a training exercise with 3 different angles, wherein Cass, balancing a knife on her finger, is shot by David, then dodges the subsequent bullets to kick him in the face, while smiling, like David is in the present, standing right behind his surprise house guest. He grabs another drink, saying shooting her was meant to keep her on her toes, and it seemed to work. Somehow. This wasn't some kind of genius instruction, as Bats thought, but mere abuse. Cain doesn't see it that way, but he can't take all the credit. Other kids he tried this with, didn't work out, but Cass, she was his only success, seeming to know exactly what David wanted. Not surprising, but for no reason as he tries changing the subject. Batman reveals he's not just here for the training films, but because of the 2 cops Cain killed during No Man's Land.
Don't ask why I didn't think of them the last time I was here. And especially don't tell Jim Gordon it took me 2 trips to confront you about them.
Cain says he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Choke on your lies!
There's no physical evidence pointing to Cain, which is something he's thorough enough to make sure of, but as he reaches for his gun, Bat says he's not here for an arrest.
Now fight! Clank, clank!
Meanwhile, Shiva continues to pummel Cass, all the while chiding her for holding back, but this meeting wasn't about another challenge. Why are all the people who can help me completely insane?
In fairness, some insane people haven't helped you at all.
Cassandra wants her predictive skills back, and Shiva, with the very same ability, is the only one who can help her. The killer takes a moment and agrees to train her, and it'll be a fairly quick lesson too. But in exchange, Batgirl must face her in a fight to the death in 1 year's time. Naturally, Cassandra is conflicted. She's still devoted to not taking a life, so she figures she'll play along, but then die when the fight comes. She'll be perfect for a year, or she could use Batman's methods and be mediocre for the rest of her life.
Okay, I know that's kind of redundant, but come on, she said mediocre. That practically summons this by default.
Later in the Batcave, Cass and Bats each take notice of the other's bruises from their respective fights, but dismiss them all the same. Just as he suggests looking to other ways to help her, she challenges him to another sparring match, with a confident smile. She can see every breath, every muscle as she tells him to strike, and when he does, she dodges each one. She gets her suit back, and when asked how she improved so quickly, her response? She gave it everything she's got.
But on credit, with no payments and 0 interest for 1 year.
While it's still a treat to revisit this series, I am a little curious how Shiva managed to reset B-Girl to standard issue whoopin' status in what seems like one night. I can understand leaving out Batman's brawl with Cain, but how Shiva reconnects the right neurological pathways so Cass is like her old self again would be interesting to see.
Though I'll admit maybe it's something best left a mystery. Unless we do see it by issue 25, he said, enticing people to watch subsequent episodes of his show.
Might seem coincidental that she encountered Shiva the way she did, but I suppose that'd depend on how long the assassin was in town before being spotted. There were parts of Shiva's dialogue that felt very knowing at times, as if she was fully aware who Batgirl was, but doesn't have to say it in so many words. Then there's her remark about how similar they are in skin tone, possibly an early indicator of the revelation that they're mother and daughter. I also like how this was the first time Cassie, one of the best fighters in the world, meets Shiva, one of the top killers. Yeah, she gets destroyed at first, but still manages to win when a more skilled fighter underestimates her. And in order to restore her former glory, she's willing to sacrifice everything.
And in order to restore her good history, I'm willing to sacrifice too. Mostly this stupidity. Because I too am fluent in the language of violence, and I'd like to have a chat. I'm the Angry Spork, and man have I got issues.